Yeah, so want to spend some time talking about grief. There's a lot of material out there on grief, so this will be limited to our observations over. We're just almost 2 years since Abram passed as of this recording, so there's a lot to find. We've stumbled our way forward, just like everything else through it. I think you did some pre-grieving before Abram passed, but I did not. And the way it hit me, I had someone tell me, so he passes away, and you feel terrible about this, but he's in a ton of pain, and he's 24/7 round the clock care. So there's really a sense of relief.
Yeah.
It's tragedy, but then there's just like relief of this, this burden of care, which, if we got to pick, we'd absolutely keep the burden on our shoulders, but
the suffering's over.
For
him. Yeah.
And a little bit for us.
Sure.
It just
watching your child suffers.
Yeah. And then, we're the caregivers. We'd have the hospice nurse would show up for, an hour.
Yeah.
But everything else was, and he was just checking on things, reporting. He wasn't, we were it.
I would say just specifically to that point, I remember feeling really guilty for feeling that relief. Like that was a really hard feeling to reconcile, that I felt some relief from not having to do all the things that we had done. And just looking back, just wish I would have, and through counseling, I think I realized this, but like, that was okay. Like it wasn't, I would have, like what Jack said, 100 times over. Like if you would have told me the rest of my life would have looked like doing the battle and I would have gotten my son, we would have chosen that. That's not even a question. And it wouldn't have been, but I remember even specifically, I think one of my darkest moments was when Abram lost his sight, which I think we've mentioned a couple times, but like it was about a month before he passed. And from what we understood, basically the tumor had grown into, I'm not a doctor, but something in the eyes, like it's not fixable. Like it wasn't like he could maybe get some light and stuff back if like the Lord would have healed him. But like with what we have medically, it wasn't like his sight was going to return. And I just remember being like, Lord, I'm a little bit thankful you're going to call him home, because I hate that he would have to live life like that. And I will tell you now where I'm at, like in that moment, I felt that. I still think he could have had an amazing life. Like I would still choose that if you take me away, but in it, in one of my darkest moments, like thinking that. And I just remember this, like, and it's not something I really shared with people, but I just remember this guilt of, oh my gosh, who am I that I would even think that it would ever be worth not having him around? And there's just this hard place that I really wish I would have had more grace for myself in those moments of just, of course, like this is tragedy, and just, it's okay to be in that moment. Like I wasn't going to stay there. Like if the Lord would have healed him, like we would have fought like crazy to find everything that would have helped him and stuff. But there was this broken part of my heart where I'm just like, my son losing his sight, and then the idea that the Lord would step in and heal. And not that the Lord couldn't heal that too, like he could have, but if he didn't, just that idea of like, okay, what other struggles from everything he's gone through he would have to face. And it's just dark. Like it was dark, and that is the reality, and that's okay. It was okay that I went dark for a moment. It was okay that my thoughts went there, that didn't define him, that didn't define me and what I would do for my son.
You're saying dark and that you felt relief?
Relief, yeah, that he was just going to go be with Jesus and not have to endure this insane amount of pain. As parents, that's what we do. I do it for my other kids still. Like, I don't want my kids to struggle and suffer, and yet they do. And I think even now, I do think we parent different because we know they're going to struggle and suffer. Our kids have already struggled and suffered differently than I think originally we ever thought they would. And so I think we do that different, but definitely going in, that's the thing. You want to protect, you want to keep them safe. And the truth is, this world is broken. And so you can't, ultimately. So to be able to enter into those places and love them. But this was a big one where I'm like, I don't want him to go through that. and really being frustrated with myself forever thinking that. And that's hard on this side. Like now it's not, but it was for a while that I ever thought that. And so
What were some of the conversations that you had in therapy, to arrive at a different place with that sense of relief?
My favorite thing, and she says it over and over, my counselor, but it's, Ashley, why would you not feel like that? Like, and that's such a reorienting question. Like, if you take your mind off of where you're at and where you think you should be, like, why would you not feel like that? Like, that is a normal response, and that doesn't make it in and of itself bad. And so I don't that for me is the thing I come back to, because that's kind of how I'm wired. And we were talking about this earlier, but I want to respond correctly, and yet it's okay. Like, I'm human.
And I think
Like, why would you not feel like that?
Two things can be true in that moment, which is you feel relief and you don't want to leave your son. Those are both things you're holding simultaneously.
And that was hard for both of us after he died, kind of. And yet it was also a gift to a degree in the beginning of grief. Like, for me, I describe grief as waves. And so I will tell you now, like, and there's an analogy, and I'd love if I could show you a picture, but like, grief doesn't change. Like, even now today, I don't think our grief is any less than what it was initially, but you grow around it. So like, the grief size stays the same essentially. And then, so the waves of grief come, but they don't hit you as often. They don't take you down as much. But at the beginning, they're like crazy. I mean, it's every moment, it's every second. And then I think, almost 2 years out, I mean, they still hit hard. I mean, real hard. I mean, I was crying in the bathroom closet this last week. I mean, they still hit, and it's not good. And it's not that it's not good. It's actually, I think it's good to grieve, but it's not easy. And yet, you get better at handling. But at the beginning, that relief a little bit of not being the caretakers, of not being exhausted, of actually sleeping through the night, of my son not screaming in pain all the time, of not having to change diapers on your son who is 8 years old. I mean, there was so much stuff that was incredibly crushing that there was relief, and that was okay. And I actually, looking back, can tell you, I think it was a gift of the Lord, because there's shock at the beginning and there's a little bit of relief. Not always. I think when you've had someone that's struggled and been sick, I think if it's an immediate thing, that's a very different type of grief that you have to deal with, because you're not expecting it. But for us to know he wasn't in pain, and then just getting to be in shock, which I'm very thankful for. Like, I'm thankful for the shock.
Yeah. So I was told I was in shock.
Yeah.
And I was like, I couldn't, I was like, whatever,
I remember thinking, someone told me that, and I was a sweet lady that I talked to, and I was like, I'm not in shock.
Yeah.
She didn't know what she's talking about.
Yeah. I was kind of like,
we were definitely in shock.
I didn't like completely dismiss it, but I'm like, I don't, okay. And, but this person that told me that, knows grief super well. So I didn't dismiss it. And, what he told me was, you're probably going to be in shock for several months.
Who was it? Was it Waylon?
It was Waylon. And,
Months.
Oh, and it is. I bet it's 3 to 6
but
months.
It is like shock. Shock is a gift. I don't say that carefully.
Yeah.
In that, like,
it's awful.
What you're dealing with is so overwhelming. Your mind, your soul cannot take the full brunt of what you're experiencing.
Yeah.
So as the shock wanes, like it's you're starting to get the full bite, and things start to hit real hard, because there at the beginning I'm fairly functional.
I think part of that too is that it wore off. I think the change for me with that specifically had to do with, it wore off this relief that he wasn't in pain. And probably about 3 to 6 months is when the memories of just him healthy started to reflood. And like, I will tell you, that first year, I probably thought about him more sick than I did healthy. And I will tell you now, I think about more of the healthy than I do him sick.
Wow.
And so that's an amazing gift. But at the same time, it's really hard to shift from a very, very sick kid who's now with Jesus and sitting with that, then sitting with my son, who I have all these amazing memories with, who, when he was healthy, that isn't here still. Like, so you're mourning, you're constantly hitting different
layers.
And I genuinely believe that's a gift from the Lord. I think shock is a gift because we are not meant to process it. This world is broken. We're not supposed to go through that. And so we can't do it all at once. And it allows you to have times, but it really sucks. I mean, I don't say that gift is a crappy word.
Well, it allows us to function.
It allowed us to function.
And you're not functioning well, but you're functioning. No. And I will say, just as a caveat before we get going, like, as Ashley and I live this thing as closely together as we possibly could, but our grief experiences and reactions are almost 180 from each other.
Drastically different.
So if I talk about something that was helpful for me, most likely it was not, or even
Still
potentially
not
hurtful for her to do what I'm saying is helpful for me.
I think what's interesting too, even what you said, is like the timing of it and what you grieve. So you were talking about very different things that you were grieving, and there's probably many things, but categorically there's things you're grieving about your son, and those sometimes you guys are crossing paths on those, and most of the time you're like in different, opening up different doors, basically, right? Of things that you're grieving, and that's really interesting. And you're partially conscious and in control of that, and some of it's just it's happening as it happens, right?
Yeah, there's no right way to grieve.
Yeah,
wrong.
I would say as when we've done it well and we've done it super poor as far as the marriage relationship, and as much as when we're doing it well, we will try and give each other as much space and room to do what they need to do for whatever's helpful.
Yeah, and to let that be okay, because it doesn't have to look like what I need, and it doesn't have to look like what he needs.
Yeah. What's hard though is when what she needs starts overlapping into things that are into my world that I can't bear.
That's right.
And then vice versa.
It's not your time to go there yet.
I think more so though, it's like that was a big one, and that's probably worth hitting on. Is so for me, Jack's my safe person. He always has been. Like, he is my person. He is what makes me feel better. But when he's in it, he is also on fire, like his whole world. Like, for me to expect him to carry me in a way that he literally can't was not fair. And that was probably our biggest learning curve, because he's always been that for me. Like, and that's a gift, and he still is. But I'm still learning this. I've not arrived, but just to have grace for him where he's at and let him chase those things. And then he can more so be that for me, but also that can't be ultimately where I depend. And that's not a fair weight for him to carry. And I think you had to learn too, like, that you didn't have to carry that. And I think that was hard for you because you were used to carrying that. Being my person that carried me, and you couldn't.
No, I couldn't. But I also I am very good at fighting for me, because I hate the drowning, overwhelmed, depressing feeling, and sometimes that's unavoidable. But I'll fight hard to stack things that help keep. I call them like bumpers, like bowling. Help keep the bumpers up, where I stay on track. But if I fight too hard, so like one of the things that's really helpful for me is lots of time in the woods. I like to hunt. I like, even if I'm not actively taking an animal, just being out there. It's quiet, it's still. Yeah. There's a rhythm in what the Lord does in the woods that there's something really healthy about it. But if I'm spending every weekend in the woods, then that hurts her, that hurts my family. Like, that's just kind of, you can't sell out to what's good and helpful.
Yeah. It's the balance.
Yeah. So and it's constant conversation, because there's ebbs and flows of things that you don't control invading your life that you're always trying to react to and overcome. And, the hard part, there's lots of hard parts.
It's so hard.
But it's so disorienting, because you thought that initially there would be these things that would be good, and it was almost like I had to rediscover most all of them.
What do you mean by that?
like
I think this is true of both of us, but
like things in like small groups or just I had some things I was just involved in that were healthy, good things for me, and then all of a sudden they weren't.
Yeah. Okay. Gotcha. Yep.
And
they're not bad on this side. It's just not the best. I mean, and they're different things for each of us, but they're not necessarily the best still. Like with where we're at, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Well, but I'm still at a spot where if it's not good, and I mean, I don't even want to do neutral.
Yeah, it has got to be like
and
for you.
Yeah, for me,
I'm a little different.
By good, would you say safe? Or what do you mean by good?
It's just safe. It's just
safe's a component, but I say good like it's if I'm putting energy and time into something or someone or
something,
whatever, like there's got to be some kind of good return on it, or I just don't have the capacity to handle much more because everything's tugging on me all the time, and I need to move forward. And so just identifying helpful things, and they're different for both of us. But I guess probably, so he passed away in September, and the shock is pretty well worn off in just about January.
Yeah, I think 3 to 6 months was kind of the shock for me.
Yeah,
3 months really was the brunt of it, and then there was kind of like a slow fade after that. But the first 3 months, I feel like, was shock.
Yeah, we were worried about like Thanksgiving and Halloween, and he loved Halloween. He loved dressing up. He loved
dressing up.
Yeah, but I don't remember those hitting as hard. But then Christmas hit hard.
Yeah. Christmas was.
Yeah,
that was the first one, and that was probably about. Yeah, when I think the Band-Aid came off a little bit.
Yeah, and then so we're trying to keep it together, but there was this natural inclination of, well, I just didn't know. And we were sitting in counseling, and the counselor was just telling me, you're really sad, and you need to be sad. And I thought that was so weird, but after I thought about it, I was like, yeah, like I just wasn't allowing myself to be sad. I was like, I'm already there. So me trying to fight it, because what was happening is, without processing this sadness, it was turned into anger, and I really just, I mean, I was acting in ways like I was at work. I mean, I've never cussed someone out before, and it happened like 3 times within those first 6-8 months.
And that football game too.
Yeah.
I forgot about the football game.
I just lost it. Because I was just like, it was a hair trigger. It wouldn't even, it was almost like an out of body experience.
It's not who you were. It's not who you are, but it was.
But yeah, but for sure, just this deep grieving sadness, and was not getting processed. And so it pivots to anger. And what you're talking about, like within a split second, I decided I was going to fight these guys at a football game that were guys you're not supposed to be fighting.
Yeah.
He should not have chose to fight them. I mean, he didn't.
Nothing happened.
It would not have gone well.
But I would have been happy to go as far as they wanted to go. And I made that decision.
But it's because you wanted to fight with the Lord, is what it is. Like, you were mad. That's what you remember you saying, like, afterwards. It's just.
I mean, I'm always, I mean, there's a piece of that. There was just a sadness.
Yeah.
And I didn't know how to, like, because it's one thing, it's like, you need to be where you are and be sad. I'm like, okay, that's great. But it wasn't like, okay, be sad, or get your cry out, and it'll be all better. And
because it doesn't. It's not all better after.
It's not. But
that's the hard part about grief.
You have to relieve those things, because there's your soul keeps count, right? And you can't cheat it and misdirect it, or you can try, but it's like that analogy of trying to hold the beach ball underwater. Like it's going to come up, and probably in ways that are not going to be helpful or healthy.
Well, I remember when we sat down with Charity, like her telling us from the beginning, like your body takes a toll. Like all the stuff we do, like she was just talking about take care of yourself. And because they had lost their son years ago and they were probably 11 years out or I don't remember.
Yeah.
But
so, it was helpful to talk to people like Charity and just kind of, because I remember even, you're like, oh, how long am I going to feel like this?
Yeah.
And we'd heard, you'll be better in a year, you'll be better and I remember just even now saying like that idea of like, you'll be better.
Yeah.
I hate that. Like, I hate that. I'll never be the same. So
we're different people.
I don't expect to be
What does better even mean?
Yeah, better.
It's a very relative term. Yeah.
It's a very relative term.
So
I will say my favorite thing she told me, and I remember that time, it wasn't that you'll be better. She said, it'll take 3 years till you really want to fight to live again. Like in the same way that, not the same way, but in the driven way that you can relate to. And I remember her being like, I hope it doesn't discourage you. And I just felt so encouraged by that because I was like, there's a light, like to the hope of getting back to a place where I'm driven and not, it was never this promise that it's going to be better. It was just that drive to fight the same way that I was used to in my life. And we're not there yet. And I see that still. And that honestly to this day still encourages me because I'm like, okay, like the times when I'm just like, I'm a mess. Like, it's okay. Like, it's okay. I am in it. I get to be in it. I don't always land there. Sometimes it takes a little bit of time, but ending up there is a good reminder for me.
Yeah.
But
just having that, like, whether it's 3 years, whether it's 5 years, whether it's
and I don't think it's a set for anyone. It was
just to have that expectation of that burden, like just it is what it is. Like we're gonna miss Abram till we see him again. Like that's just the way it's gonna be.
But looking at their last 11 years, whatever it was out, like did encourage me because I'm like, I will look at them and I'm like, the things they fight for, the things they're doing, the things. I mean, there's hope there, and that is a gift that we were given that I needed to see at the very beginning because they didn't know us at all. Like, I mean, we knew them through mutual people, and
I would just be careful about trying to explain your grief or make sense of it to someone who doesn't know it, because well intended, but silly things get said, and
it should only be done with very safe people that haven't gone through it, and then I think. Those are very real conversations you can have with someone that has. And I think there are people you can have those conversations with outside of people that have gone through it, but I think those are harder to come by.
Yeah. Just be careful how you do that. And
or take whatever they say with a grain of salt.
Or don't take anything from it. That's kind of my opinion. But
it's definitely your opinion.
Because so I read a book. I was given a book by a guy who also had his own journey in grief.
Should we talk about giving people books though? Because that's a fun one.
Yeah. Depends on who gives the book, right?
It depends. It really depends who gives you the book.
Yeah,
that's very true.
Like it's just, I hate giving people books because I know how it feels to get a book,
and it's not. Like, I genuinely think people's hearts are very good. Like, it was never like an offensive. It wasn't an offensive thing. It's just my capacity was so low. So to just get a book was hard.
Yeah, this will make it better. You're like,
Probably won't.
But
there's helpful things in books.
Yeah.
For sure.
But I mean, I'd read most of C.S. Lewis's A Grief Observed, and I think that was the first thing I read, the first part of the book, I didn't even finish it because it got a little bit, to me, it felt like too much of a, hey, I've turned the corner, and that's probably not what he intended at all. But the first part of it, he was just describing it, how visceral everything was in it. And that was just comforting to me because that's exactly how I felt.
Yeah.
And this other book I was recommended, it's not my favorite title. I would have never picked it, but it's called Bearing the Unbearable. And
I like the title.
Well, I wouldn't have picked it up with that title, but anyway, it's been a wonderful read, and it didn't fix anything, but it put words to things I felt. And it's written by this, I believe she's a doctor, and she does counseling and specific to spaces of grief. And so it's a lot of anecdotal stories of grief experiences and kind of the way grief can bind you up is, I mean, there's really no limit to how it can change somebody. Even I think I told you I grew up watching the movie Braveheart. I like that movie. I watch it now, and he's reacting out of grief for his wife being killed, and it just clicked in my brain of just like the things we'll do in grief. Like you could tell me someone did any kind of thing that's just nuts or crazy or whatever, and I'd be like, and they were just coming off a loss, like, oh yeah, I believe that. Mm-hmm. Like it does something to us, and if we're not trying to just grieve those things out and process those things out, and that book really encouraged doing that. Said, here are the repercussions for not doing it, so that you have these stories, and then here's how to do it. But just even, one of the biggest takeaways I had was, there's a story about someone, had lost a child, and their best friend came and said, hey, we're just not going to be sad anymore. We're just going to move forward. It's time to move on. And like, I'd been told something similar to that, but how she described it, I felt all this, but I didn't know how to say it. But basically what you're telling somebody, it's like, hey, it's time to keep going. You're telling them to leave their loved one behind. And that's never going to happen. Like I will never leave Abram behind.
Well, what's the quote? She said something, and I loved when you said it was like, the extension of what we were doing is love, essentially, or something like that.
Right. Abram is only known now in pain and grief. And not only, but primarily, because I can't think about him without some part of loss or pain or both, even in good memories.
Even in good memories, there's always a mix of
we
tears.
Miss him. Sure. Yeah. We miss him. And for you to tell me to move on, you're telling me to leave my son behind. And I'm never going to do that. And so someone coming at me with that is so incredibly offensive. And I'll just leave, or I'll fight you. One of the two. It's just I'm not going to leave my son behind. And that's how it hits. Is it's time to move on, time to move forward. There's no moving. Like, we're going to do the best we can.
We fight to live. Like, even on this side, like, I think we fight to live as best we can, but very messily.
Yeah, but we're not at his expense, and not.
No.
We're going to keep pictures up. We're going to keep.
Yeah.
We're going to think about him. And we invite and love when people are like, we're on a family thing, and someone's like, I bet Abram would be doing this.
One of the biggest gifts on this side, and to anyone even just that hasn't gone through it, but that ever listens to this, is just speaking their name, talking about memories. Like I do think it's hard, because there is a scary place to step into that where you don't want to upset someone. And like, the truth is, even if I start to cry when someone shares something like that, it was already there. Do you know what I mean? Like, they didn't do that. It was, and I think that's a really hard place, like, sometimes, and it was for me definitely on the other side to enter into, because you don't want to upset someone, you don't want to take away their happy moment or whatever, but at the same time, people that are in grief, that are in pain, like, that is a constant thing that they're already feeling. So when you speak about them, when you talk about them, they might end up crying, they might, and yet I will tell you, they're going to leave that with a gift. Like, it is a gift at the end of the day. But I do want to point out just real quick, because I think it circles back to what we were saying earlier, like, I have not read a book since Abram passed. Like, so to talk about differences, like, I've seen these things be really helpful to my husband. I told him I was going to read the book that he talked about. and I read a couple chapters, but it's hard for me. It's really, really hard for me on this side. From someone who actually enjoys reading.
What about it?
I mean, I read novels all the time still, but
Oh, okay, got you.
I like reading. I
Yeah.
don't want to read about
A self-help book.
like self-help of whatever it is.
Yeah.
I just don't. I don't have it.
Yeah.
That's not where I'm at right now. And I love reading. So
Yeah.
I mean, just to point out that that's okay. Like that's okay
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and I've given that book away a couple times to people that in grief, and my encouragement was just, hey, just read the first 10 pages. If you're like, no way, just put it down and don't worry about it. But if it's good, just obviously hang in there. But
And it just affects people different. Like different things are helpful for different people, and that's okay.
You guys feel like you know how you grieve, or you have a sense of when you're like your patterns of grieving? It's almost like there's grief, which is what you're in, which is like fighting the mist.
How does it look?
And it comes and goes whenever it wants. And then there's like the act of grieving, which is a conscious thing that you begin to interact with that mist as it comes through your door, kind of thing. And now you may have a better sense of what to do, right? And I say that because I remember you talking about some stuff and experiences you've had where it'll come, and before it was like you had no idea what to do with it, and now it's like there's an acceptance of it, and then you kind of go somewhere with it. It's my understanding of it, at least. But I'm asking, do you see patterns now after grief was this thing that was in some sense very new to the gravity that you guys were experiencing it, and then you had to kind of learn how to live with it, and to navigate through it. What does that look like? I guess do you see any patterns in how you handle it now?
Definitely patterns.
yeah, so a lot
Different patterns.
Yeah, a lot.
I'm sure. Yeah,
a lot in all that, but for sure, like I need to cry. Is how, when I say like process grief, is I really like there's something the way God made us, like just the tears is a really good thing, good for just expelling those things. So I have noticed, like if I'm way dialed up or I'll get really tense and short fused, I probably need to cry, because it's drifting into that anger realm, and there's all kind of triggers and things that will catch me that I think I'm fine, and then turns out not fine.
That one's consistent for both of us.
Yeah.
That's very common. Like, I think the times we're both throwing the most is because we both kind of expect more things now. I mean, almost 2 years out, different things, but that'll trigger us. And there's just times where both of us get caught off guard. And those are honestly some of the hardest because you're not expecting it.
So yeah, we're 2 years in, and I mentioned my Uncle Waylon a minute ago, but he told me there's like 3 different kinds of, when you're talking about like kind of events. It's like the events that you anticipate and it's actually not as bad as you thought it'd be.
Yeah,
So
that's
whether
true.
that's holidays
That's very
or
true.
whatever milestones, there's the events you don't anticipate, and those are rough because you didn't expect it, and you're just undone. But then I hadn't experienced that till this year. Was the third, was as we do anticipate, and it's still awful.
Yeah. Because when you do anticipate, I think the difference is you're kind of pre-grieving, if that makes sense. So like when I know it's coming, like sometimes it'll be like, okay, his birthday's coming, and I'll, like the first year when we, like of his first birthday, like when he would have been turning 9, I remember just being completely undone for probably a month before his birthday. And then I remember that day, like we ended up doing worship in a front yard with just, friends and family. And it was such a sweet day. I mean, don't get me wrong, like it was hard, but what I thought that day would be was not.
Yeah.
And then last year when he would have turned 10, I think because of that scenario, it's like, oh, it'll be better. And I didn't freak out as much on the front end, like grieve. I didn't. And then that day hit, and I was I was not in a good place. I mean, it was just like, I knew it wasn't, and I just wasn't. And it's interesting it just hits different. And there's truly no way. Like, I would love to be like, this is what to expect, XYZ formula. And there's just not. Like, even, I mean, I think a big one, and I want to hit on this, and this for sure for grief for me was, I told myself that whole first year, if I can make it through this year, this year at this time, Abram was alive. Like, I mean, that was a constant on replay for me. And so I'm like, if I can get through the first year, and I will tell you, one of the hardest things was going into year 2. And I was so blindsided by that, just thinking I had done the worst, and then going into year 2, and there's not a worst, but it wasn't any easier. And I don't say that to discouraging one, but just being more aware of, like, he was still gone. Like, just because I made it through. So I was so focused on, if I make it through this year, I'll be able to breathe a little bit more. And yet the truth is, grief was still there. Like, grief was still there the day after he had passed away a year ago. You know, I mean, that wasn't different. And so I think this year, coming up on almost him being gone 2 years, so we'll be going into year 3 soon. Like, that has been my biggest lesson this year, is just letting go of this expectation of when I get here or what to expect. Like, when we're going to go to the beach with my family for his 2-year heaven anniversary, or whatever you want to call it. I don't know what the right name is. I haven't arrived on a name yet. And I don't know, like, last year we didn't really do anything. Like, we just didn't, and I didn't want to, and that was okay. And that wasn't great. So this year I'm like, well, we're going to go do something. We're going to go away. We're going to take the kids out of school. We're going to go to the beach, and it might also go bad. And you know what we'll do? We'll try again next year, because like, it's going to be a thing. And so I'm going to try to fight for things that are healthy for us, that are healthy for our kids. And the truth is, we don't know what that is. And it very much could look different on different years. I don't think there's a one formula. I think it could look different for different people.
Yeah, so like,
there's not a recipe, and I wish there was.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah, whereas like for me, last year, that was good. We did a pickleball tournament and got in the pool afterwards with friends, and
it was harder for me.
And that was great. But then his birthday, I did not want to do worship.
We were opposite on this.
And it was awful. His 10th birthday was like, the 9th birthday was.
The 10th birthday was bad for both of us.
Yeah.
That was.
The 10th birthday was the example of, we're anticipating it, and it was still awful. And just wrecked us. And
I don't think I anticipated it as much as the 9th, because it was his first birthday without him here. And for me, birthdays are harder, at least like on this side, than, you know, the day he died. Because the day he died, I'm like, dude, he was embraced by Jesus. Like, I'm not like, it sucks. I mean, it sucks. I'm not making light of it. But his birthday, I'm like, I'm supposed to celebrate you living. Like, I'm supposed to celebrate your birth. And that is a really hard thing to do when you're not here. But
yeah,
I didn't feel as upset beforehand. It was that day it hit me, and I was
feeling it weeks before, and then through that weekend, I was like, man, I'm almost unfunctioning.
Yeah, we were both pretty unfunctional. I mean, I didn't even like the kids wanted to do, this is awful, but this is the truth of where I was at, was that night, the year before, we had done a balloon release, which was really cool. Like, we each rode on a balloon, and, you know, just whatever we want to say to them. I'm just trying to explain to our kids, like God, you could ask God to read it to them in heaven, but like, I mean, the truth is, I'm like, there's so much stuff there that it was just too hard. But I'm like, I also didn't want to lie and be like, hey, I'm going to read your balloon. Like, you know, so there was this, whatever. And they loved it though. I was just like, I don't know what it'll do, but this is more for you. Like, you get to write what you would want to say to him on his birthday. We wrote him on the balloons. We let him go. And so they really wanted to do this again this last year. It is cool, but like, I didn't even get out of bed for it. And I got home and I was just like, I can't. And that makes me still sad. Like, it does. Like, honestly, like, I saw the pictures and I'm like, I hate that. I hate that for my other kids, like, not for Abram, like, he's fine. Like, I'm not worried about that part. But I was so not okay that I couldn't be there. And the grace of God, like, we have family that was, and Jack was there, and like, but I was like, I can't go do it. I don't want to go do it. I don't want to go do this. And I couldn't muster it. And I know that that's okay, like, factually. But it's still a really hard place as a mom to sit of like, I want to be that for my kids now. Like, they want to do this. And so I want to show up for that, because that is part of their story. Like, this isn't just me and Jack. Like, that's a hard thing I think we miss a lot. Like, they're grieving, they're in it. And so when we're in it and I'm trying to love them, and yet there's just so many components that are hard that I don't always know how to navigate. And that was one of those days where I just was like looking at the pictures the next day and I'm just like, it sucks. It sucks.
Yeah. And then one of the other tricky things is like, as
when you say tricky, do you think of Abram?
Yeah.
He loved that word.
Abram's saying when it's a little
That's
tricky.
a little tricky.
It's a little tricky.
He said it all the time.
It's very applicable.
Like, all right, bud, you need,
It's a little tricky.
you need to take this medicine. He's like, Dad, that's a little tricky. Oh,
This is so bad. I loved it. I love the word tricky.
yeah.
Sorry.
Do you remember what
I
was
just derailed you.
Well, what it was is what will happen is if we'll be in good rhythms.
Rhythms are huge in grief.
Yes, and so there's good things like, for me, if I exercise and like I picked up pickleball and that's super fun, something I can compete and contend in. Time in the woods, I said, good meaningful spaces of conversation and safe places to dig around and wonder. Cold plunge, all these things. So like I'll have spurts,
Cold plunge. All y'all.
where there's a lot of that, and I'll feel good. But
then we think we have more capacity for what we don't.
correct,
Yeah.
and it just takes almost nothing
Doesn't take a lot.
to knock me down.
Yeah.
And it always surprises me, and I don't know why it continues to surprise me that way.
It's hard to rebound.
It is, and it's like, just you get a little out of rhythm, and then just things kind of. I remember that first year we got invited on. Well, I got invited, and then I made Joey go with me on a hike, a backpacking trip, and
Joey's like, I can't say no now.
yeah,
He was waiting for you to tell us part of the story.
Yeah.
well,
Joey's gonna chime in real quick.
one of the things that struck me
It's his turn now.
when we were going through everything with Abram, we were eating for comfort and convenience.
Oh, yeah.
And there was no working out regular.
No,
So
we were eating beverages, all the stuff, like all the things for comfort.
so I was not in very good shape, and so I get invited on this backpacking trip, and
But we still did on the grief. I mean, we still do on the grief side. I have not arrived.
I don't know what you're saying.
Like, anyway, I think those are still struggles.
Yeah,
Talking about the snacks.
I think you're trying to say that we've arrived.
Everybody
And I
loves
don't know that we've
snacks,
arrived.
no, that's the opposite of what I'm saying.
Oh, okay. You can finish your story.
Okay. I get invited on this backpacking trip, so I really start trying to exercise because I'm in way not ready shape to be doing this backpacking trip.
Did you
And-
start exercising, Joey?
We did a little bit together.
Yeah,
Yeah.
We went on walks with
That's it.
packs and anyway, I remember I think it was Easter of that year. I got real sick and I couldn't.
You had the flu.
I couldn't work out for it was like 9 days, and I just remember like the depression hole I went into, and just that little bit of consistency, that little endorphin release. Like it was, I had no idea how much value. Like it didn't save me, but it was like helping keep my head above water.
Yeah, and you're the one that helped with that. Like you're walking around not knowing what's going on, and you say you should probably go work out,
I did.
and then it
That's been a consistent
light bulb
thing, though.
in your head, right?
Yeah.
And-
And it helps me, but it is nowhere near the same, like for him. And it's been like that our whole marriage. Though. Like I've
Yeah.
seen a consistency of like when he's working out, I mean, his whole mood is different.
Yeah.
Yeah, and
You got to learn those things though.
yeah, but again, like it surprised me just of like you just took that away, and then my whole world just kind of spiraled out of control just because I physically was unable to.
And rhythms were weird right then.
Yeah, I mean all of it, but like it was so helpful, but I wasn't even aware of how helpful it was until it just went away.
Yeah.
And those things, again, it just surprises. It still surprises me when things get changed a little bit, how just how little margin I actually have. And
We've been there this week.
yeah,
So.
yeah. I mean, just little thing. I mean, whether it's in relationships and like there's things like, oh, I want to take this on. This is I think this would be a worthy endeavor of conversation, or it's, whatever it is. Then something happens. I'm like, nope. Just kind of.
Yeah. When stuff gets hard, like it's these moments, like, this last week, it's a perfect example. We've been in it. So there's things we're like talking about we want to do, like people we'd like to try to reconnect with or whatever that looks like. And we've had these conversations for the last couple weeks. And then, our rhythms since school started in August have been awful. They've just been hard. And they started being off in the summer, but they were all good things. So it's hard. There's just a hard balance of how to weigh that. And so we're out of rhythm. We go to school thinking this is like, okay, we're in a routine and it's gonna be better. And we have not. And so we both, the last week and a half, we're just spiraling. And it's interesting. So you asked this earlier of like consistency of what you see. And I will tell you, for me, that's probably the biggest ones. Like when I'm in rhythm, I function so much better in grief. Not great. Grief is hard. Like you're not supposed to be great in grief, right? Like, but the way I can process it, the way I can handle it is very different than when everything gets chaotic and I feel completely like my home feels out of control, life feels out of control. I don't do well. I don't. And I go to shutdown mode. I operate very different. So Jack has a gift, like he really does, where he is this drive in him. He's like, I'm not going to stay stuck. And he'll fight for those things. And I'm almost 100% opposite. I am shut down. I'm going to be recluse. Like I'm not going to put myself out there. And that it's not good, but it is how I'm wired. And so aware of that and then trying to fight all the more hard to get out of that is hard. And so I'm way less likely to get in that place when I have rhythms. And so that's a big consistency we've seen, but we don't have them right now. And that's been.
Yeah, and a lot of that's just, stuff out of our control.
Yeah, it's not in our control.
So it's just life happens and
you're not going to get that.
There's an ideal to try and go after, but you can't always do it.
But the point of that is too, like, all these things we were talking about, hey, we really would like to do this. Let's put this on the calendar. Let's try to connect with these people that we haven't seen. And it's not that we don't desire those things still. It's just all of a sudden we're like, no, like
can't do it.
Everything turns to no. And that's okay. I actually think it's a very healthy response where it's just like everything from here out, like we want to go do these things. We want to be present and we might end up last minute deciding to go do some things, but where we're at right now, we cannot commit to anything.
Yeah.
That's this whole last week has been, we're committing to nothing else. Some of the lows
are too low.
Nothing else.
Yeah, you can't go and pretend for a night and show up.
It's not worth it. It's not worth it. There's no capacity to go pretend.
How do you guys talked about it a little bit, but you kind of have these individual stages of grief and you're going through this process together, but you're going through it as yourselves and how do you guys navigate when he's somewhere and you're not there or vice versa? Like, and I'm sure you guys
it's most of the time. Yeah.
It's most of the time. Right.
Yeah, most of the time we're not
in the same
place.
What does that even look like? Like, how do you guys, do you know when he's there and you're like, okay, kids and vice versa? And is there,
I think we know each other there. I don't think we always navigate that well, but there is a gift in how, like, what God gave me and Jack in marriage. And it is a gift and I know it's rare, but like neither of us hide, like what has always connected us. We're very open and honest with each other. That has never been the issue. Like we don't bury stuff under rugs. Like that's just not what we do in our marriage. Sometimes it doesn't look pretty on top of the rug, but it's a gift, I think, in this season, because I know when he's not okay. He knows when I'm not okay. How we navigate that, though, it's been a very messy story.
Yeah.
It's not so much not being aware, though, of it.
Yeah. Again, it's so if I will try and take on more if I know she's in a hard spot and she just needs to do her thing. But then the problem is that you don't have a lot. I'm at way less capacity than normal. So pretty quickly that effort, I start to unravel and then it gets real messy between the two of us.
Yeah. Cause you go more, I don't normally go to anger. Mine's shut down. So we kind of respond different. Like he's been talking about, like, he gets sad and he gets angry. I get really sad and I'm out. Like, I'm just like, I just want to escape. And And that's not always the best combination, because what he'll do is like, I'll just be done. I'm like, I'm not doing anything with the house. I'm not doing anything. And I just don't. And so he'll come in and he's super helpful and he'll do dishes and all this stuff and loves me super well. But then you can only do so much. And so then he'll hit a breaking point and then he starts to get mad. And when Jack gets mad, it starts as pokey, snarky. So he does these like pokes. But I actually think we're both pretty witty. Like there's part of our marriage that's a really sweet thing. Like we're kind of witty with each other and like we'll make jokes. So it kind of feels like that. And then comes in as like this like, oh no, but we're really poking. And then I get really sad and I don't have the emotional capability to deal with it. And I mean, that's kind of our, would you say it's fair? Like cycle of
before I'm like
how we navigate it.
Before I'm done, I start to get mouthy. And
yeah,
then,
you get pokey. And then you're just done.
Yeah, and then
you're trying to pass the baton essentially, and then you're like, "Hey,
essentially," and I don't want to take it.
I got any more of this?
I don't want the
because
baton.
Running out of gas.
I mean, if we could, but we've got 3 other kids at home that got to get taken care of, and and how getting taken care of, like that definition changes.
Our kids are awesome.
But if she's out and I've got
just like, what's for dinner? I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever you can find. It's a very real story.
Yeah. And if I have to, I can figure that out. But if it becomes a long-term thing, then I start to burn out real quick.
How visible is your guys' grief to them when you're going through these things? These different like layers of lowness?
I think for you, they see a lot.
I've always tried to be honest. Like I am a mess some days and I'm short with them and I always follow it up. And this is because I'm like, I don't want them to ever feel like I'm upset with them. It's just mommy's struggling today and I'm sorry I've been short with you, or mommy's just really sad and I don't want to be like this, but this is where I'm at. And my goal, even when Abram was sick, I want to be trustworthy to my children. And so I'm going to own where I'm at and I want them to be aware, because what I don't want is in their own grief for them to ever feel like I'm upset with them, because it's not. Like most days it's me having to own, and it happens often, of I'm really sorry, like this is where I'm at and I know I'm being short, I know I'm grouchy, but I need you to know why. Because and I'll be really honest even about what I'm struggling with that day, like and it looks different days, but like, hey, this happened. I'll tell stories to them of, hey, this happened with someone with Abram and I saw this picture and it triggered me, or just trying to be real, because I want them to do that. Because I think the healthiest place they can be as they get older is to be aware of what they're feeling and what makes them feel sad. And so if they can process that, I mean, I think that's huge. That's one of the things. When I was in counseling when Abram was sick, I remember my counselor at the time just telling me, the more you can process now, the easier it'll be on the other side. It won't be easy, but the more you can process now. So I even think about our kids with that, of the more I can share with them how I'm processing, if that can help them process. Like, so I think they're very aware, probably significantly more of mine than yours.
Well, see, I don't like if I'm going to like cry, it'll almost always be by myself. There's something that's harder for me to let go if I'm with Ashley or the kids, because there's always
like either of us just cry in front of them though blatantly. It's just okay. I tear friendly. I am teary, but I don't like have my full meltdowns where I can't breathe.
But you don't have a problem doing that in front of me, but I rarely do it in front of you.
Yeah, I don't think that's completely fair, but yeah, I don't think I do it as much around you as you think I do, relatively, for how much I do it.
Okay.
That's a good way to put it. That's a good way to put it.
I might have my moments where
You're like,
compared to me.
You're like, you only see 2% of my cries.
Yeah, I know. I'm like, I just don't feel like that's a fair.
Okay, well that's fine. But there's always, as husband, as dad, you're always kind of thinking about caretaking your family, and it's just hard to let go in their presence. And so most of the time it's like I'm either sitting in the woods or in my truck, or I spent some time at his gravestone last week, and I need to feel it. I need it quiet. I need to sit. There's usually some kind music accompanied with it to kind of help me think about him, think about all of that, and then I can release emotion, and it's not in tears and raw, but there's no control in it, and I have a hard time doing that really around anyone else. I've done it, but it's really hard for me.
I think I've only seen it once on this side, but I don't think I'd ever seen it before. Maybe twice on this side of it where you were just undone. But that's, definitely rare.
Yeah.
But I think that's okay. I don't think you need to do it around other people. I mean, I'm not saying that like that, because the truth is,
I don't feel bad doing it that way. I
think it's okay.
It's just very different.
I think it's good to be aware of how you're wired and
because I mean, sometimes I'll get caught and I'm in a public space and I'm like, well, this isn't happening right now, so I'm stuffing it down. But I know if I don't deal with that at some point fairly soon, there will be repercussions for it.
I remember an early one, and I can't remember why. I think it was a song that came on. It was in Kohl's, and it was the same. Like, I was just like, I was so close to completely losing it in the middle of the store. And I'm like, I cannot do this right now. And I did by the time I got to my car, but and I think it would have been okay if I completely lose in the store, but.
Yeah. As much as you're able to just deal with it as you can.
Process the more you can process.
Yeah.
There's not lighter, because I don't think, and we've talked about this, like, I don't necessarily like have these big grieving moments and feel lighter afterwards. I think before the type of grief we're in, I think that was more true, like where I'd be pent up and I just kind of needed a good cry. What did you call it? You used to call it rodeo clowning me. Mm-hmm. It's from a show, but basically he'd poke because he's like, you just need a good cry.
This is not a grief thing. This is before.
No, this is before. This is before grief. Do not do this in grief. This would be a bad decision in grief. But that was what I used to call it. And I'm like, it really did. Like, sometimes I just got so, I didn't even know why, but there was just emotion and I just needed a release. Then I'd really feel better. And I think that's been surprising on the side, because I still need that, because it is worse if I don't, but it's not necessarily like I feel better after. Honestly, sometimes, this last week, and I lost it on Monday, and it's just still been heavy. Like, I just still feel this, not like I need to cry all the time anymore. Like, I think I got my cry, but just this weight that is still there. And I think that was surprising to me. So just to be aware of that, on this side of it.
Yeah, it's all different. It never makes any sense.
No. Sometimes it does have relief. I don't know. That's, probably.
Yeah, but it's like, as soon as we think like, okay, this is the way forward, and then it's not, and then it's a monster. But it helps talking with people that have preceded you on that journey, and
mainly just that for me is huge. Just talking to people that have been in it, because I feel crazy sometimes. Like, I think about stuff and I'm just like, I just feel crazy. Like, but what you feel is probably really normal. And so just to be around, like, there's so much gift in just sitting with someone who's gone through it, and they're not going to try to fix it. They don't have any answers, because they're not. Same thing we're saying right now. There's not answers. There's not answers on how to do it well. There's not an answer on how to get through it better. But just sitting with someone, them being like, yeah, I've been there. And that is a gift. And that's like the Dangs. I know we've talked about them before. Like, that was like, we see them maybe every 6 months. Like, we're not consistently hanging out, if even. But the times we sit with them, the gift that I have of just, okay, I'm not alone. These are normal feelings, is a gift.
We swapped texts how long ago this was, Jack, and I can't remember if you shared it with me or if I shared it with you, but we were swapping like images on grief kind of thing. Mm-hmm. There's a couple different ones, but the one that's sticking out in my head right now is the one that's a shelf, and it's a bookshelf, and it has a huge book on it. It's entitled Grief. Just says grief on it. It's just a big black book, and the shelf is completely empty. And then it shows after time goes on, kind of what you're talking about. I think it's why it comes to my mind. The shelf is full, right, of all these other books, that book called Grief is
It didn't
right in the
change.
same spot, right? Didn't go anywhere. But there's pictures and there's other stories and books and artifacts that come from living, right?
Yeah.
And so it's like I wonder, like that lady said, 3 years kind of thing. It's like as you live and you take your grief with you because it's not going anywhere, you add more things around it.
Yeah.
More life, more stories, kind of thing. And it's like you're different in 3 years. The grief is still there, but you're the thing that's changed.
You're changing.
And your family's changed, and your story has changed in some sense.
I think that's important to touch on though, because I think, and we're talking a lot about how hard it is, but we fight to live. Like you have to, and I will tell you, I mean, I'm so thankful for Jack. I'm so thankful for my other 3 kids because I do think that would be really hard on my own. And I don't know where I'd be, to be completely honest with that. But we fight to live because, first of all, we have them to care for. And I think that's huge because I'm like, I want the best for my kids. And so I'm going to fight to live because that means they're fighting to live. And it's part of their story. But just for us too, I mean, this is our story. Like this is what we were given. And so to fight for that, like for me, I mean, people will say to both of us, and not that I know it's very well intended, but you're just so strong. And I'm like, I don't freaking have a choice. Like I'm not that strong, but you know what I'm going to do?
Yeah.
Like what other choice do I have? I can stay in bed, and I do stay in bed some days.
Surviving.
Like I do. Like
Yeah.
you get to do that to a degree, but if I did that every single day, if I stayed in bed every single day, like what life is that? Like this is what I have.
Yeah.
And so in my mind, I'm just like, I have to make the best that I can.
Yeah.
And that it's a messy road and it's not pretty. And I have not arrived.
Yeah.
But I'm fighting. And I told Jack, like, as we both grieve different, like we talk a lot about this, like grieving different. For me, like things that are safe, like I love worship music. That is the easiest way for me to connect with the Lord. And that has been really hard for Jack. And ultimately, I'm like, that's okay. Like, it's okay. But what I care about, and what I tell him is like, as long as you're fighting, and he fights like hell. I mean, more than anyone else. And so I'm never worried. Like, it's not it needs to look how mine does, or mine needs to look how his does necessarily. It's, are you in the fight? And I think we could both confidently say, well, we might have not good days. I think ultimately, if we could look back over the last couple of years, like we're both in the fight.
Yeah.
And I think there's no other way to live.
It's a good question. Yeah.
Yeah, but there are those days where
There's absolutely days. I mean, there's days I just don't go to bed. But it's not the norm. Might be 25%. I'm not saying it's a high percentage, but I mean, we're not a ride, but it's similar like people that are on diet. Like you have more good days than bad, right? You're going to go the right direction.
Yeah.
And so if we can orient ourselves that way of, okay, if we can have more good days than bad, ultimately, if we can fight for that, what is good today? And that looks different on a daily basis in grief. What is good today? Let's fight for those things. And I think communicating that is huge for us. What is good for you? What's good for me? I mean, we are constantly having that conversation in our house. What's good for the kids?
Yeah.
And really outside of that, letting go of everything else, because
Yeah.
you can only deal with so much.
Yeah, the image in my mind is like in the Rocky movies where he's just, or there's Rocky 1 or Rocky 2, where he's just getting this snot beat out of him. So like, I'm not, because I think we get pushed forward to places I feel pushed to places like, oh, you're so strong, you're in this place. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm like, when I think of like the Rocky movie, I'm thinking of it when he's just got the snot beat out of him. He's just barely getting up off the mat. It's like,
He's getting up.
I will get off the mat. I can do that. I'm not holding my hands up in victory.
Yeah.
There's no
Really good analogy.
no like victory in this. But I will keep getting up off the mat, and I commit that to my wife, to my kids. Just to keep getting up. But don't call me whatever you're trying to call me, like, because this, like, that's not true, and I don't even want that. Like, cause
I think that's the hard thing. It's because we don't have a choice, so it makes it feel like you do. That it's not a mean statement. Like it doesn't. That never offends me when someone says that. But in my mind, this is what I process of. I don't have a choice.
Yeah, we're not gonna quit.
No,
But we're not holding our hands up.
yeah, we're not in victory.
Yeah, and like there's such a desire and push for that story of, well, you were here, but now you're here and you're on the mountain. Like, no, I'm not. Don't.
Yeah,
I get angry.
I do too, and it's that's been a wrestle for me my entire Christian faith. I mean, that has always been this thing where I've always felt like I operate a little bit like that. That's a hard story for me because I'm like, but I'm still struggling in certain areas. And that's different in different seasons. But that story of I was this and then I'm here, and God does that. But there's normally still struggles mixed in, right? Like, so not that he doesn't heal from something, not that he doesn't help you overcome something. There's normally still struggle, and there is struggle. There is struggle in everyone's life still, regardless of where you're at in your faith. And so even comparing it to that, I think this is a very similar thing that hits hard because that's always been hard for me as hearing those stories. Because that's not mine. Because I'm like, but I'm still struggling with this. Or and then maybe the Lord allows me to overcome this, but then now I'm here. And I mean, that's part of it. And so I think it's not dissimilar with grief, where we might figure out an idea around something that we might feel a little bit better about and more grounded as time goes, but then something else blindsides us. So I don't think we arrive. I don't think that's the story. I think you just keep fighting and get off the mat.
Yeah, you're not going to be doing another podcast in 5 years and be like, no, we just kind of did it. You know,
I was there and now I'm here.
So that was our story of, and it's probably not, because you don't find it to be true. Yeah.
No.
But y'all do both fight really well. I get asked a lot, how are you doing? How are they doing? And I just listening to y'all talk about that, I respond a lot. They're doing a lot better than they think they are. And that's because I see that a lot. I think to where it's like y'all feel like you're just getting pummeled. And I see it watching the fight. I'm like, making the corner, like, look at him, like, and so it's cool to watch you live life and fight for it. It's encouraging. So,
yeah, it's thank you. It is. It's very hard and worth doing, but hard.
It's worth doing.